In this video tutorial, we're going to take a look at how to do some color grading or color correction to your video clips using Edius Pro version 8. And we're just really going to do kind of an introduction in this tutorial. Color grading is something that you can spend a lot of time at and develop your skills in that over several weeks of playing around with the various color grading tools that Edius provides. So it's not something that we can really cover in a brief tutorial. But we're going to give you an introduction so that as you start your first edit, you'll have an idea of some of the tools that are available in Edius and which ones are perhaps better than the others, so that you can concentrate on what are considered to be the best color correction tools today in Edius and start with those. Let's take a look at our edit here. We have kind of finished a section here that deals a lot having to do with still shots. And now we're getting into an area that deals more with video.
Some time ago, the World Health Organization set a global goal to reduce the number of decayed and missing teeth in children.
And in this project, I actually accessed footage from a number of different shoots down in the Dominican Republic over the last 7 or 8 years using different cameras. And so the result was that we have a lot of different looks and feels. Some of this footage is actually from parts of Africa as well as the Dominican Republic. And over the last 6 or 7 years, I have shot with video cameras and DSLR cameras. And so when I piece all of this material together into one timeline, it's a little bit of a challenge to make the footage kind of conform to each other and have kind of the same look and feel. And Yet we can do some of that using the color correction tools and filters that are available in Edius. Let's go over to our effect palette and take a look at some of the tools that are available. First of all, maybe just so that we can see our shot a little better as we work with them, let's go over to View and change this to single mode so that our image is a little bigger. We can even open this up a little bit more. Ideally, when you're doing color grading, what you would like to have is an output to a broadcast monitor, because the computer screens are going to vary in quality and shading and coloring, and what may look fairly decent on your computer monitor may not necessarily be the best colors for broadcast output. And so when you're judging the changes that you make using the color correction tools of Edius, it's always ideal to be able to view that on a broadcast monitor. But that having been said, you can still do a lot just working even on a laptop, especially if it's a good quality screen, good quality video card in your laptop, or a desktop with a fairly decent monitor and good video card. You can get pretty close to what you need to these days. Okay, so let's then go to our effects palette, and all of the filters that we'll be looking for to work with will be in the color corrections folder. You'll see that Edius ships with a number of different types of color correction tools. Probably the simplest to work with is the color balance tool. Let's find a shot that might need some help here. This one is a little bit cool looking. When I say cool, I mean the colors are cool. It's kind of a bluish, and in order to blend well with some of the other warmer footage that we have here, we might want to try and work with this shot. We could maybe start just by way of introduction, look at perhaps the simplest color correction tool. It might be the color balance. Let's drop that on. Simply drag your filter tool from the bin, the effects bin, and drag it onto the clip that you want to affect. And you'll notice that what happens is that Edius automatically switches to the information palette, and the filter that we just dropped on our clip will show up there. And what we can do is just double click on that, and that will open up a dialog box that will allow you to make changes to the shot in the way of chroma, brightness, darkness, as well as contrast and a coloring filters. Unfortunately, this tool, while it may be very simple and easy to work with, is not the best tool in Edius. It's a very simplified approach, and basically, especially when you're working with colors here, you're just really adding a filter, a color matte filter over top of the video, and it's probably not the most effective way to add or change the warmth or blueness that we were concerned about. But if you're just starting out with video and you're just not quite sure how to work with these filters, this might be the easiest one to start with. But let's take that off. We can just at any time delete. You can remove the effect simply by unchecking it, or you can just, with it highlighted, hit the delete key and it'll be gone. Let's go back to our effects palette, take a look at a couple. A more sophisticated color correction tool is the three-way color correction tool. Let's drag that on and then open it up from our information palette. And as you look at it, you can see that this is a lot more complex color correction and actually works with the image itself in a more sophisticated way. You can affect just the black sections of the video. You can just work with the midtones or just work with the highlights separately. So you can be much more detailed. If it's just the midtones that you want to change and leave your darks and your whites alone, then you can just work with the gray balance here and move that around and until you find something that's just a little bit warmer, and hit OK. Let's take it off, and you see the difference between the two shots. All right, probably a favorite tool up until the version 8 that most experienced editors like to use when they're doing color grading is the YUV curve. Let's drop that on and take a look at the properties there. And if you're familiar with Photoshop, you'll recognize this curve where you can make nice adjustments just like you would in Photoshop. Get a nice S curve going there. It's quite sensitive, probably more sensitive than what you would normally be used to working with still shots in Photoshop, but you get the same kind of concept there where you're working with the dark areas of the video down near the bottom of the stream. You're working with the midtones using the center node, and if you want to make adjustments to the highlight, the white areas of your video, then you'd be making adjustments to the very top node. And you can add more than the 3, of course, if you want to get more fine-tuned. Unfortunately, this particular tool is not really set up to make adjustments to the U and the V areas of the video very easily. If you start touching these areas, you're going to probably run into problems that you're not going to like at all. And you'll probably end up just hitting the default button to bring you back. It's more designed to work with brightness and contrast, really, in a clip rather than it is to easily change the color of the video. So prior to version 8, most editors had to work in combination here using the YUV curve as well as the three-way color corrector that we were using before. But with version 8, there's a brand new tool that is very useful. I've really enjoyed working with it. It's called the primary color correction tool. So let's drop that on to our shot and open that up. And the real advantage to this tool is that no longer are you limited to working with the YUV color space. This tool not only gives you the opportunity to work with contrast and brightness like you would with the YUV tool, but it also now gives you the opportunity to work with your video clips as though they are in the RGB color space. So if you are looking at this and you say it's just, if you're feeling like it's just a little bit too blue, you can go over to the blue and then pull back on the blue. Say we want to work with the mid-tone areas of the shot, Well, we can just pull back on the midtones by taking the center node and pulling back. If we felt that the blue was really a problem in the dark areas, then we'd want to grab the blue node down here. Or if it's in the whites, then you would want to work with this one here, the top one. So it's the same principle of the Y curve in Photoshop or in the YUV curve in Edius, where you've got your midtones, your highlights, and your blacks, the ability to work with those separately. This tool gives you the opportunity to try a shift in the color temperature after the fact. So if you felt the way the camera shot it was just a little bit too cold, well, you could warm it up by just sliding this across a little bit, or go in the opposite direction and add just a little bit more blue. And then you can experiment also with gamma, lift, gain. Let's try taking some of the blue away from the gamma. Again, that is very sensitive. You don't want to do it too much before you start making it look just a little bit too green. But you can see that you have a lot more effective and efficient control of your color correction here using the primary color correction tool. So I encourage you, if you're really just starting out with video, I would recommend this as being your first tool to learn when it comes to color correction. Really, the YUV curve here is something that you can also work with right over here. Because we were only working with the Y part of the YUV curve, you've got that here in this tool. You can do basically the same thing here. All right, let's maybe just take a look at some of these others. Some of the shots that we used in this edit were filmed with a DSLR camera, where the settings, the menu settings on the camera were set really low for sharpness. This is kind of the recommended way of shooting with a DSLR camera, is to really bring that sharpness level down in the menu. And the idea is that the edit software is likely to do a lot better job of sharpening the video than the software that's inside the camera. And so many of the shots that we are using here in this video do come in with a very soft look, and we need to add sharpness in the edit suite itself. And so let's try that out. Let's go to our effects palette and go to our sharpness tool here. Here it is here. Over in video filters, it'll show up as a sharpness. So if you're working with footage that was shot that way, you definitely will want to add sharpness. So let's just drag that sharpness filter down to our clip and open up sharpness. And I've found that you can bring that sharpness right up to 20, 25 and still be fine. And that's a lot clearer. What else? What other kind of problems are we running up against? Let's see. Okay, this shot filmed under fluorescent lights, but also additional warmer lights. It gave kind of a result of being a little bit green. Let's try our primary color correction tool on this and see what we can do. Let's try our color temperature first. Boy, it's a little hard to know what to do with this because it's warm enough, but it's just maybe a little bit too green. Perhaps because of the fluorescent lights in the dentist office there. And so in this case, what we might do is go down to our curves and go to our green and just pull down on the midtones of the green there. And hopefully get rid of some of the greenness of that shot. And once we do that, we might then go back up and try and warm it up a little bit with our temperature control. And that's a little better. Okay, one other shot here I think I wanted to point out. Oh yeah, this one is really bad. This needs a lot of help. Let's try our exposure slider here. It looks like it might be just a little hot. Let's pull back on that just a little bit. The problem with using the exposure filter is that you're going to bring down the values of the whole clip. If we were to open up our vector scope here and watch what we're doing here, and this is whenever you're doing color correction, it's a good tool to have open. What you want to do is, we see that there's some highlights blown out here, and that's probably because of the window. That's showing up here going over the 100 mark. This is the line for the 100. And if we were to use our exposure slider, what we're going to do is bring down the values of the whole clip. And including the midtones are going to come down at the same rate as what we bring down the whites. Ideally, what you would want to do is go down to your Y curve here and just try and bring down the whites themselves and leave the midtones alone. You might even try dragging the node right at the top and just bring that down so that those whites get down below 100 without affecting the midtones. Now, it could be that the midtones do need to come down a little bit as well. And also, I think the blacks need to come down a little bit. But doing it this way, you've got independent control. Okay, so what can we do with this ugly green? Let's go over to our green tool here, and let's see what happens if we pull back on the green. We have to be careful not to do it too much. And we see the green is affecting not only the midtones, but also the white areas. And so we might even try independently affecting the gamma, pulling down the greenness in the gamma. And in the gain. And then we might want to try and warm it up a little bit, temperature-wise. So with our temperature control, okay, well, I think that looks better. Let's take a look at the difference between the two. I think it looks just a little dark now. Let's maybe kind of come up on the midtones a little bit. We see that the blacks are going down below the 0. That's not always best. Let's try and pull it back on that. So you get the idea of how you can do some very wonderful color correction to your shots. Then the next thing that you'll want to do is make sure that there is a certain consistency between your various shots. You can really see the difference between what was shot here with a Canon DSLR camera and this was a Canon video camera. The Canon video camera, the images are a lot sharper. And so what we want to do is kind of even things out here. And what we can do is maybe add more sharpness to this shot. Let's go find our sharpness tool again and sharpen that up a little bit. And then add some softness to this shot here. And Edius does have some soft focus filters. And so let's drop one of those on. Now that's way too much. But we can open up that and change not only the radius, but also how much blur that you want to add. And we'll probably want to bring down the brightness a little bit. And there you have, well, let's maybe go back to our primary color correction tool. Something I might point out is when you are working with more than one filter, when you open up a filter that is higher up in the hierarchy, when you open it, it is going to only show you what it looks like as if you were dealing with that filter and the filters above it. So to work with it more accurately, we need to drop that down so it's the lowest filter on the list and then open it. And now it's going to give you a better representation of what all the filters are going to look like as they work together. So now as we make changes, we can look at it visually and see what it's going to look like And I just want to bring down the midtones just a little bit. Okay, now as we compare these two shots together, they're a lot more closer in the way of
The
focusing.
World Health Organization said.
Still not quite happy with the midtones on that. Just a little hot. Maybe let's try the whites too. Come down on that. So you can see that you can go into a lot of detail as you work with color grading. I think what I'd want to do with this is maybe drop on a YUV curve and see what we can do about crushing some of those blacks. And one of the things that maybe is still good about the three-way color corrector, let's drop one of those on, open it up, is that it gives you the opportunity to adjust saturation and contrast on the three main areas of the video. So if we want to try and adjust the contrast or saturation of just the black areas of the video, or just the midtones, we can adjust the contrast on just that, add a little saturation to the midtones, make it a little warmer. And so there are still some advantages to the color three-way color corrector. Okay, well, I think that those were some of the main things that I wanted to show you, how you can do some color grading as well as use your Edius filters to try and bring some consistency to a variety of shots that may have been sent to you from different cameras. Try and make it as consistent as possible in your edit. Now, we will be doing some more tutorials on some of these tools of Edius down the road. Basically, all we've done here is just given you a brief introduction to what can be done with some of these tools. But in later tutorials, we'll take a look at each one of these tools separately and go into more depth. So if you want more information, more training on some of these tools, I recommend you sign up at ediustips.com. And over the next few months, we'll be recording a number of tutorials that will cover these filters and effects of Edius. But for now, I believe that does it for how to do color correction in Edius.